Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we'll read from Mantra 2, Isopanishad. Via his pure representative, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So there's only two rules in Krishna consciousness: this bhakti yoga, this mantra yoga. And the first rule is always remember Krishna, and the second rule is never forget Krishna. That's it. And everything else is there to help that. And Krishna is non-different from the transcendental sound vibration, his holy name, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. Always remember Krishna. Never forget Krishna. And the purport is accept everything favorable for always remembering Krishna, and reject everything unfavorable for forgetting, that causes forgetfulness of Krishna. So it's two rules, two purports, and as one devotee posted a comment saying, keep it simple, sadhu. Keep it simple, sadhu. So by always remembering Krishna and never forgetting Krishna, this is a trance state. It's a meditative trance. It's called samadhi. And it's perfectly achieved when the devotee always remembers Krishna and never forgets Krishna. And they enter this trance state. The mind, everything is in terms of serving Krishna, remembering Krishna, praying to Krishna, worshipping Krishna, making friends with Krishna, carrying out Krishna's orders, surrendering completely to Krishna. This is a trance state, a trance. You go into a trance. And the beauty of this bhakti yoga is that you don't have to just sit somewhere and do nothing. You use everything in Krishna's service. So you can be quite active. Building temples, cleaning floors, having babies, making families, cooking, cleaning, sewing, working, driving a vehicle to make income, to maintain the life. But everything is done always remembering Krishna and never forgetting Krishna. And the mantra is the secret to success. Receiving this mantra from the lips of the pure devotee, that's the secret to success. Because whatever one is doing, after you got this vibration going, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And of course it's actually desirable to minimize doing too much stuff. Rupa Goswami talks about that in Nectar of Instruction, that over-endeavor causes this forgetfulness of Krishna. Over-endeavor, overeating, anything excessive like that that's very difficult to achieve, or keeping the association of undesirable people who have no interest in remembering Krishna. They're just absorbed in. So these things can be detrimental and lead to forgetting Krishna. So they should be avoided. So over-endeavor also is one of the big problems. Working very hard for something very difficult to achieve. A lot of times you don't even get it. And even if you do, it's like after, 5 minutes, like, eh. Yeah. So achieving this trance state and accept everything favorable for Krishna. 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 Everything favorable for remembering Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. So, hearing is the first recommended process. Yay, Haribol. Remembering is the first recommended process. Hearing for remembering Krishna. And then chanting. It said that if you hear from a pure source Krishna, and then you repeat what you've heard at least 3 times, you've got it. So this hearing and chanting is significant. It's a science. So let's hear something about Krishna from a pure source. Krishna's man, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this is the 1974 edition. It hasn't been updated and improved. It's straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, Mantra 2. 5 or 6 paragraphs. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastai Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyabadi Paskachadi Satarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the first mantra in the Isopanishad, which comes from the Yajurveda, actually the invocation, Om Pranam Adhak Pranamidam. The invocation establishes the completeness of the Supreme Being. It's perfect and complete, nothing missing. Even though everything's coming from Him, He's not depleted, it's all still within Him. Spiritual math, 1 minus 1 equals 1. 1 plus 1 equals 1. And how the living entity in the human form has reached the completion of the cycle of reincarnation, transmigration. In the human form is the completion of that cycle of 8,400,000 species, with the opportunity to realize their connection with the complete whole. So it's a very serious situation, because if they don't realize the connection and actually become perfectly complete, go back to Godhead, make the connection with the Supreme Being, then here we go again. It's like a carousel. Go around for another spin. 8,400,000 species. And that can go on indefinitely, because the purpose of the whole thing is to reach this complete form. The human form is complete. Now, not all human forms have the best situations. Some humans are born with not too much intelligence, and some are born with physical problems. Some are born into a difficult economic situation. Some don't have access to education. So, but still, the human form, no matter these things is discussed, they're irrelevant, because there are no hindrances to devotional service, and the human form, even if it's limited in some ways, still, so you might say, well, what about blind or deaf? Still, the message of Godhead can be perceived. I'm not an authority on this, not an authority on anything, but for someone who can't hear, they can still feel vibrations. They can feel vibrations. So it's a difficult situation for sure. Or someone who can't speak. These are definitely like terrible situations. But can still engage in devotional service and get some benefit, some realization. But that's rare, and most people have enough facility that when they taste some prasadam, or they hear a message of Godhead, or they see the deity form, or they engage in some service, even unknowingly. There's an example that was used, I used to hear it used, that there's a doorkeeper at a hotel. You know how the cars pull up, these fancy hotels, and the doorkeeper is there in his little outfit, and he opens the door. It's small, yeah, but it's significant. A little goes a long way in a really dark place. He just served a devotee. He opened the door and welcomed him. Isn't that what Lord Chaitanya did with Prakasananda? Big Mayavadi, sannyasi, thousands of disciples, very erudite scholar. But his conclusion was not the personality of Godhead. His conclusion was the eternity aspect only, Brahman. It's all one, and there's nothing going on there. Just existing. And at the request of his followers, I think it was Chandrasekhar and somebody else, they couldn't stand to hear Lord Chaitanya spoken of in the way that Prakasananda was speaking about Chaitanya, because Chaitanya was going through the streets chanting and dancing in ecstasy of Krishna consciousness. And Prakasananda was criticizing him. Oh, he's just sentimental, he's just he's frivolous. He should be studying. So he was, in a sort of a way, blaspheming the activities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Chandrasekhar, and I think it's who it was, and somebody else. They weren't very advanced devotees. It said that they were materialistic devotees. They hadn't really achieved, of course, in association of Lord Chaitanya, it's hard to, how can that be? But that's what they said. They weren't even necessarily very advanced in their devotional relationship with the Lord, but they couldn't stand to hear this. They just couldn't stand it. And they requested the Lord to do something. So the Lord appeared at one of the gatherings with Prakasananda and the other Mayavadi sannyasis. And in a very humble way, he sat in the back near the shoes. And Prakasananda saw him. Now Prakasananda, I'm sure he was quite curious about this very unusual sannyasi. And of course the Lord was glowing. I mean, it's like, it must have been so attractive. I mean, like a sannyasi like you've never seen before. And Prakasananda was getting it, but he wasn't sure what he was seeing, I'm sure. But, so he approached the Lord and he extended his hand. Oh, please, come and join us. Why are you sitting in this with the shoes? He extended his hand to welcome the Lord into the assembly. And it said, just by doing that, extending his hand to the Lord was able to deliver him from Mayavad. So there's the doorkeeper at the hotel. He's been doing that for who knows how many years. And he opens the door and out comes a devotee. Haribo. Hare Krishna. Agyata Sukriti, unknowing devotional service. He was in the right place at the right time. He got it. So the invocation is a beckoning to us to use this human form of life to realize our actual completeness and avoid slipping back down into 8,400,000 species, a cycle. And then we're going to read Mantra 2 eventually. In Mantra 1, helped us to understand that everything is owned by the Lord. First of all, He's the complete. He's complete. But He also is the owner of everything. All His energies, both animate and inanimate, Paraprakriti, the organic energy, the living energy, and Aparaprakriti, the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, gross and subtle. Everything is owned by the Lord. And that He has set aside a quota for every living entity, and not to disobey that. Because it brings ruin. It ruins the human being. Just see what happened to Adam and Eve. They disobeyed the Lord. That's when all the problems began. Okay, so this is Mantra 2. Kurvan evaha karmani jajivashek chatam samaha Evam tvai nanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare. Kurvan eve ha karmani jujibashak chitam samaha. Evam tvai nanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare. Kurvan eva ha karmani jujibashak chitam samaha. Evam tvai nanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on doing work in that way. So that's from the previous verse, only accepting those things necessary for himself which have been set aside as his quota. So he can go on working in that way for hundreds of years, because that sort of work will not bind him to the law of karma. There's no alternative to this way for man. Prabhupada's purport. No one wants to die. Everyone wants to live for as long as he can drag on. This temperament is not only visible individually, but also it is visible collectively in the community, society, and nation. There's a hard struggle for life in every class of living entities, and the Vedas say this is quite natural for a living being. The living being is eternal by nature, but due to his bondage in the material existence, he has to change his body from one to another. This process is called transmigration of the soul. This transmigration is also called karma bandhana, or being bound by one's own work. A living entity has to work for his livelihood because that's the law of material nature, and if he does not act according to prescribed duties of his particular life, he transgresses the law of nature, making himself bound more and more in the cycle of birth and death. So there's verses in the Gita also. One should perform one's duty even if done imperfectly, rather than to try to do someone else's prescribed duty. So, living entity has to work, and if he does not act according to his prescribed duties of his particular life, he transgresses the law of nature, becomes bound more and more in the cycle of birth and death. The cycle of birth and death is present in life other than the human form. When the living entity gets the chance for human life, however, it is his chance to get free from the chain of the law of karma. Karma, akarma, and vikarma are principles very clearly described in Bhagavad-Gita. So karma, a lot of times people will say, oh, karma, that's his karma. But karma simply means action. No, there's different kinds of actions that are performed. Prabhupada is going to discuss these different karma. Karma means action. Karma in itself isn't like some horrible thing, it's just action. It's when the actions are outside the laws of nature that there's a karmic reaction. So Prabhupada is going to discuss here karma, akarma, and vikarma. The principles very clearly described in Bhagavad-Gita. Actions, karma, which are done in terms of prescribed duties mentioned in the revealed scriptures, are called karma. Actions which make one free from the cycle of birth and death are called akarma. And actions which are performed by the misuse of one's freedom, thereby directing oneself toward the lower regions of life, are called vikarma. Okay, so there's good karma, bad karma, and no karma. Good karma, you get a reward. Bad karma, you get punished. And no karma, you get the heck out of here. Let me see what Google has to say about karma. Google's pretty smart. Okay, so here's what Google says. Google's good at Sanskrit too. They know how to correct Sanskrit verses and everything. Okay, here's Google says, the sum of a person's actions in this and previous states of existence, viewed as deciding their fate in future existences. Yeah, okay, and here's what Wiki says, Wikipedia. Karma means action, work, or deed, and its effect or consequences. Okay, so it's not just an action, but it's an action related to its result. It's like the whole picture. It's like, yeah, karma and results are connected. Action, not just action, but action and its results is probably a better way to understand karma. Not just activity, but activity and the result of the activity can be understood as karma. So, activity done according to the scriptures, the result is you get a reward. And karma done against the scriptures, you get a punishment. And akarma is activity, with the result of which is freedom from the cycle of birth and death. So karma is, the term specifically refers to a principle of cause and effect. Okay, so karma is, the word means cause and effect. Karma. Yeah. Okay. Struggle with that for a while. All right. Of these three categories of activities, the one which makes one free from the cycle of further bondage to cause and effect, Prabhupada says, further bondage to karma, further bondage to cause and effect, is preferred by intelligent men and women. Ordinary men want to perform good work in order to be recognized, achieve some status of life in this world or in heaven, but more advanced men want to be free altogether from actions and reactions of work. So karma means action and reaction. Intelligent men know well that both good and bad works are equally causes of material miseries of life. Yeah, you get a reward, you have to come back to accept it. They therefore seek to do work which will free them from the reactions of good and bad work. This freedom from good and bad work is ascertained herewith in Isopanishad, Sri Isopanishad. The instruction of Sri Isopanishad is better explained in the Bhagavad-Gita sometimes called Gita-Upanishad, the cream of all the Upanishads. In the Bhagavad-Gita, the personality of Godhead says, no one can attain the state of nice karma or akarma or freedom from action and reaction, cause and effect, without beginning prescribed duties mentioned in Vedic literature. The Vedic literature can regulate the working energy of the human being in such a way that one can gradually realize the authority of the Supreme Being. When one realizes the authority of the personality of Godhead, it is to be understood that he has attained the stage of positive knowledge. At this purified stage of life, where the modes of nature, goodness, passion, ignorance, cannot act, one is enabled to work on the basis of nice karma, or work which does not bind one to the cycle of birth and death. So that's the science of Krishna consciousness. Everything is done as an offering to the Lord, in consciousness, in trance state. Krishna consciousness. Factually, no one has anything to do anymore than render devotional service to the Lord. In the lower stage of life, however, one cannot at once adopt the activities of devotional service. Nor can one completely stop reactionary work. So in the lower stage of life, a conditioned soul is accustomed to working for sense gratification, for his own selfish interest, immediate or extended, like family, society, country. An ordinary man wants to work for his own sense enjoyment. And when the principle of sense enjoyment is extended from the individual to include the collective, society, nation, or humanity in general, it assumes various attractive names such as altruism, socialism, communism, nationalism, humanitarianism, etc. These isms are certainly very attractive forms of karma bandhana, bondage to action and reaction, cause and effect. They're Maya's trick to keep the living entity engaged in cause and effect, action and reaction, karma, good karma. The bondage of one's own work. But the Vedic instruction of Sri Isopanishad is as follows. If you actually live for any of the above isms, make them God-centered. You don't have to stop. Just add Krishna. There's no harm in becoming a family man, an altruist, a socialist, a communist, a nationalist, or a humanitarian, provided all such activities are executed in relation with Ishavasha, God-centered conception. God-centered activities are evaluated in Bhagavad-Gita as being so rich that even a little bit of them can save one from the greatest danger. The greatest danger of life is to glide down again into the evolutionary cycle of birth and death. If some way or other a man misses the spiritual opportunity offered by his human form of life, and thus glides down again into the evolutionary cycle, it must be considered the most regrettable incident. Although foolish men cannot see this due to his defective senses. Sri Isopanishad advises us, therefore, to exert our energy in the Ishavasya spirit, and in that engagement we may wish to live for many, many years. Otherwise, one's long life is no better than that of a tree, which is also a living being, and which lives for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's some trees, some of these redwoods are like 5,000 years old. They were here when Krishna was here. There is no point in living a long time like the trees, or breathing like the bellows, or begetting children like hogs and the dog, or eating like the camel. Even a humble life with God-centered activities is more valuable than the colossal hoax of so-called altruism or socialism without any relation to God. When activities such as altruism are executed in the spirit of Sri Isopanishad, every one of them becomes a form of karma, yoga, not karma bandhana, becomes karma. There's action and reaction, but it's in relationship to Krishna. So it's karma yoga. The results for Krishna, karma yoga, as is recommended in Bhagavad-Gita. And that guarantees the executor against the dangers of the evolutionary process of birth and death. Such God-centered activities, even though half-finished, are still good for the executor. Executor. How do you say that? Executor. Okay, we're going to hear how they say it. How do you say executor?
Executor.
Yeah, I was right. An executor. A person who produces something or puts something into effect. An executor. Okay. Such God-centered activities, even though half-finished, are still good for the executor because they will guarantee him the human form of life in his next birth. In this way, he can have another chance to improve his position on the path of liberation. So it's not the ultimate goal is to become a humanitarian or a philanthropist, even if it's God-centered. It's not the ultimate goal, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, and this will guarantee him a human form, next birth, and then he can have another chance to improve his position on the path of liberation. So that's how that works. It should not be discouraged because there are people who really can't do anything else. They're so attached to sense gratification, to family, society, community, nation, humanity at large. They're so attached, they really can't do anything else. They can't just give it all up and all of a sudden become in trance on Krishna. Not usually. So they're inclined toward humanitarian work. They're inclined toward philanthropy, inclined toward this or that. So, but do it not as karma bandhana, bondage, just for some material result in your own name and fame, but do whatever it is with God in the center, God conscious. Hare Krishna. So the spiritual master is expert at engaging people in using whatever propensities, talents, assets they have in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.